This video was sponsored by MyHeritage. Russia has been ramping up its military for 3 consecutive years, building a powerful army with proven combat experience. Meanwhile, Europe has faced decades of military decline. Although defense spending is on the rise, the only European force with real battlefield experience is Ukraine. Europe's main strategic advantage, though, US deterrence. With 100,000 American troops stationed across the continent and a nuclear umbrella, this presence has long been a formidable counter to Russian aggression. But could this be changing?
We're also here today to directly and unambiguously express that stark strategic realities prevent the United States of America from being primarily focused on the security of Europe.
And that's putting it mildly. Trump has repeatedly flirted with the idea of pulling US troops out of Europe, especially from Germany, and even hinted at leaving NATO during his previous presidency. Meanwhile, the likely new German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, vows independence from Trump's America, warning that NATO may soon be dead. Therefore, in this video we'll explore the reality of the Russian threat today, the current state of US military presence in Europe, and what Europe would need to defend itself if America pulled out for good. For Russia, the war in Ukraine has been costly, but the Kremlin continues to go all in, spending billions of dollars and mobilizing everything from military factories to social media disinformation. The result? A military that's bigger, meaner, and more battle-hardened than the one that stormed into Ukraine in 2022. By the end of last year, Russia had 700,000 troops in Ukraine, far more than 2022. And in just 1 year, Russia produced 1,500 battle tanks, a 220% increase compared to 2022. They also cranked out 5,700 armored vehicles, a 50% boost, and 1,800 long-range loitering munitions, a staggering 435% jump. Oh, and those drones they used to borrow from Iran? Not anymore. Russia is now producing its own. And then there's military spending, where Russia is, quite frankly, off the charts. The International Institute for Strategic Studies estimated Russia's military budget last year at $145 billion, or 6.7% of its GDP. That's over 40% more than the year before. Meanwhile, Europe's combined defense spending in 2024 was $457 billion. Impressive. Until you dig a little deeper. If you calculate Russia's spending in purchasing power parity, adjusting for the fact that things are a lot cheaper in Russia, the Kremlin's military budget jumps to a staggering $460 billion. And for the first time in a very long time, Russia is outspending all of Europe. Insane, right? And what makes this even scarier? Russia operates under a single command and speaks one language. Us Europeans? A very different story. NATO and several European countries believe Russia could be ready to attack a NATO country within 3 to 10 years, or even sooner. There's even a massive military exercise in Belarus this summer, simulating conflict with NATO, and that will showcase Russia's combat readiness. And if they can pull this off during an ongoing war, Europe should pay attention. But as said before, Europe has one big deterrence: NATO and the USA. But before we look into that, have you ever wondered about your family's past? That's where today's sponsor, MyHeritage, comes in. A true game changer in discovering your roots. When I first tried it, all I did was enter basic information about my parents and grandparents. And boom, my family tree started unfolding before my eyes. I uncovered my great-grandparents and traced generations I never knew existed. All easily done with MyHeritage's intuitive platform and its 20 billion historical records. What's more, I uncovered some fascinating family connections. For instance, I found ancestors with roots in Turkey and Indonesia. Turns out the Dutch colonial history in Indonesia wasn't just something I learned in school. It's part of my very own story. And here's the best part. I added my first cousin twice removed to my family tree, and he reached out to me. And now we're collaborating on our own combined family tree. MyHeritage also has incredible features to bring your family history to life. I found this very old family photo of my great uncle, and their tools let me repair, colorize, enhance, and even animate it. It's like stepping back in time. And here's the exciting part. you can try it all out with a 14-day free trial. So, drive into your family's past today and uncover stories you never knew existed. Check out the link in the description below. Back to the video, where we're breaking down just how big America's deterrence in Europe really is. First, there's US support for Ukraine. Since February 2022, the US has provided 114 billion euros in financial, military, and humanitarian aid, an average of 38 billion euros per year. Crucially, this includes advanced American weapon systems and the powerful message that the US stands firmly with Ukraine. The US also has around 100,000 troops stationed across Europe. Most of them are in Germany, with smaller but significant numbers in Italy, the UK, Poland, and Spain. The idea is very simple. If Russia were to attack a NATO country, those 100,000 troops would be reinforced fast by up to 200,000 more, mainly US armored units tailor-made for the Eastern European battlefield. That's a pretty solid force, but it doesn't stop there. The real ace up Europe's sleeve? US nuclear bombs as deterrence. During the Cold War, the US had over 7,000 nuclear warheads stored all across Europe. Today, that number is much lower, but still significant. Although exact numbers are classified, experts estimate about 100 US nuclear bombs are currently stored at 6 sites, 2 in Italy and 1 each in Turkey, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany. That's serious deterrent. So, that is the status quo. But with a new Trump administration in place, things could change.
Now is the time to invest, because you can't make an assumption that America's presence will last forever.
Germany's entire defense is subsidized by the American taxpayer. There are thousands upon thousands of American troops in Germany today. Do you think that the American taxpayer is going to stand for that if you get thrown in jail in Germany for posting a mean tweet? Of course they're not.
The new administration definitely isn't known for its strong Atlanticist views. In fact, they've made it pretty clear that America's days as Europe's security blanket might be numbered. So, while still unlikely, what happens if the US pulls out entirely, leaving Europe to defend itself? Could Europe step up and fill the gap? First, let's take a look at Ukraine. And here, there are 2 scenarios. In the first scenario, there's no peace deal, and Ukraine keeps on fighting. From a purely financial perspective, Europe could replace US support without too much trouble. To match US aid to Ukraine, the EU would only need to spend an additional 0.22% of its GDP. That's not a huge ask. The second scenario is trickier. Ukraine accepts a US-Russia peace deal, and Europe needs to secure the border with peacekeepers, an estimated 150,000 troops, likely without US help. Meanwhile, Russia would likely continue its military buildup, posing a serious threat to all of Europe. And this points to the real problem: replacing American troops in Europe if they leave. To match the fighting power of 300,000 US troops, Europe would need to significantly boost its military strength, focusing on mechanized and armored forces. On paper, Europe, including the UK, has 1.5 million active duty military personnel. Sounds super impressive, right? But they're scattered across 28 national armies, each with its own chain of command. The combat power of 300,000 US troops is far greater than the same number of European troops divided among different national forces. US troops operate as large cohesive corps with unified command structures and unmatched strategic enablers, like strategic aviation and space assets, things that Europe simply doesn't have. For example, to prevent a rapid Russian breakthrough in the Baltics, NATO would need at least 1,400 tanks, 2,000 infantry fighting vehicles, and 700 artillery pieces. That's more than the combined land forces of France, Germany, Italy, and the UK. The bottom line, it's not just about replacing numbers. It's about matching firepower, unity, and strategic reach. And right now, Europe is nowhere near ready. And then there's the big one: nuclear deterrence. If the US were to dismantle its 6 nuclear bases in Europe, it would leave a massive gap in Europe's defense. But Europe isn't entirely defenseless. France and the UK have their own nuclear arsenals, though nowhere near as many warheads as the US or Russia for that matter. However, things are shifting. French President Macron and Germany's likely next Chancellor Friedrich Merz are already discussing the possibility of sharing nuclear capabilities. This could even mean storing French nukes on German soil, aiming to create a European nuclear shield, independent of the US. But building a credible nuclear deterrent takes time. And in the short term, Europe simply can't replace the security provided by the US nuclear presence. So, the bottom line is clear. Europe cannot replace the US presence in the short term. But in the long run, that's a different story. With the right investments and strategic planning, Europe could achieve full military independence. And that brings us to a crucial crossroads. Europe must make a choice. Option 1. Build up national armies and rapidly enhance military coordination throughout Europe. Without better coordination, defense costs will skyrocket, and European national efforts won't be enough to deter the Russian military. Or option 2, create a unified European army, an additional force of at least 200,000 soldiers supplied by national armies to replace US presence in Europe.
We must build the armed forces of Europe so that Europe's future depends only on Europeans, and decisions about Europe are made in Europe.
Whichever path Europe chooses, one thing is certain. It will require a lot of money. Defense spending will need to rise significantly from the current 2% of GDP. Initial estimates suggest an increase of about 250 billion euros annually, raising the total to around 3.5% of GDP. And to make this affordable and economical, European scale procurement is essential to lower military production costs. German leadership will also be critical. Alone, they would need to increase its defense budget from 80 billion euros to 140 billion euros, about 3.5% of its GDP, on top of joint EU funding. Right now, German military capabilities fall short of NATO commitments. For example, Germany's pledge to provide NATO with 2 divisions, around 40,000 troops, by 2025 and 2027, is already facing serious setbacks. Here's my take. If Europe wants real deterrence and a seat at the table with the big boys, it has to act as one. Looking at the options, both have potential, but the second one offers far more advantages. By building a unified European army, mass procurement becomes easier and cheaper when Europe buys as one. Standardization also gets a massive boost. Instead of juggling 17 different types of tanks across national armies, a unified force could streamline to just one. A unified command under a single structure as a separate pillar within NATO would be far more effective than fragmented national variants. But getting to option 2 would require massive political will and a complete overhaul of the EU's defense structure. This won't happen overnight. Of course, there are many more problems, and if you want to know more about how this could play out, check out our previous video linked here, where we go into the topic a lot deeper. And don't miss out the chance to explore your family roots. Sign up for a 14-day free trial of MyHeritage today. And to support us further, consider joining us on Patreon. Every contribution helps us bring you more in-depth discussions on Europe's future. Thank you to our presidents, Jan, Sjoukje, Kristin, Peter, HVD, BJ, and Unite Europe. See you in the next video.